When Mary and Joseph presented the baby Jesus in the temple, Simeon said of him that he would be a sign of contradiction, or a sign that will be contradicted. The Cambridge Dictionary's definition for the word contradiction is the fact of something being the complete opposite of something else, or very different from something else, so that one of them must be wrong. I'll give you a couple of examples. A ton of concrete is very light, or I'm studying engineering so that I can be a good doctor. St. Paul in today's second reading gives us another example when he writes to the Corinthians, "It is when I'm weak that I am strong." I'll come back to this notion of contradiction. Brothers and sisters, in today's readings we encounter three men of the Bible, Ezekiel, Paul, and Jesus. Before God set them off on a new direction, Ezekiel was a Levitical priest exiled in Babylon. Paul, or Saul as he was originally named, was a faithful and zealous Pharisee, and Jesus was a simple carpenter. While they were living their relatively peaceful lives, God called them to a new and different way of being. Ezekiel went from quiet priest to outspoken prophet when, as he writes, "The Spirit came into me and made me stand up, and I heard the Lord speaking to me." St. Paul, as we know, went through his momentous conversion outside of Damascus, from persecutor of Christians to one of their greatest defenders. And finally, we have Jesus, who says in today's gospel acclamation, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He sent me to bring good news to the poor." When any of us is converted anew, we go through a process of regeneration or rebirth, which sets us onto a new path. On this new path, we are called as members of God's church to a true change of heart and mind and direction, to proclaim the gospel afresh, ultimately becoming signs of contradiction in and to the world. The world will say one thing, and we, as faithful disciples of the Lord, will say another. Brothers and sisters, as you know, we live in a time when many Catholics want to make the church palatable to the world, where they want to align church moral teaching to what the world proclaims to be acceptable behaviour. If this were to happen, the church and all of us who are called to be faithful members of it would then fail to be the signs of contradiction that we're called to be. For as St. Pope Paul VI once wrote, "It comes as no surprise to the church that she, no less than a divine founder, is destined to be a sign of contradiction." Let me say it again. As Catholics, as Christians, as the Church, we're all called to be signs of contradiction. If we agree with the world, then we're probably on the wrong path. And what can we expect if we hit the mark and become these signs of contradiction that we're called to be? Well, brothers and sisters, we only have to look at the prophets, to the apostles, and to Jesus to know what the cost of fidelity to the truth is. The more we become conformed to Christ, the higher the scrutiny we will be subject to. Our opponents will air our past sins and indiscretions and weaknesses. These will all be used as evidence as to why no one should listen to us. We will be constantly reminded of Jesus' words in today's gospel, "A prophet is only despised in his own country." Even if they recognize the new virtues we may have collected, as the people of Nazareth recognized the wisdom in Jesus, they will likely still refer to our past as they use Jesus' past against him. That is, he's just a simple carpenter. He's just the son of, brother of. All of these were used by Jesus' opponents as evidence against his credibility. So, brothers and sisters, don't be surprised if when you stand up for the Catholic faith, you're suddenly rejected, in particular by those you know and love, family, friends, neighbours. They'll question your motives, your capacities, your worthiness. Don't let that stop you as you're called to be a sign of contradiction. In fact, one of the most obvious signs of contradiction is that we're not good enough to do God's work, and yet he still calls us to do it. For as St. Paul tells us in the second reading, Jesus will give us all that we need and say to us, as he said to St. Paul, "My grace is enough for you, my power is at its best in weakness." At the end of the day, brothers and sisters, it is God's work, and it's all about the building up of his kingdom. We're all called to be partakers of that work and that kingdom. It doesn't belong to us just as the church doesn't belong to us, and even our own lives. All is God's, and he wants us to return everything back to him. So let us go out today committed to be signs of contradiction to a world gone mad, trusting always that God will supply for all of our shortfalls, giving us everything that we need to complete such an onerous task. Because ultimately, it is when we are weak that we are strong.